What's up, guys? This is Jashawn again. I want to talk to you guys this week dealing with shame. And one thing about shame is that we all face it. We all have felt shame and all have dealt with shame. Growing up, learning more about myself, learning more about people, becoming an adult. We all tend to look at our past and we begin to think about, okay, I wish I never did that. Man, I wish this went a certain way. I begin to think about my past, like my deep past, things that I don't even want myself to know. You know what I mean? Like those type of things begin to kind of surface up. I was curious, are there things that I do now habitually that I may not be aware of doing? Do I still do those things based off my past? And am I responding negatively to a certain thing or person based off my past? God began to show me more of who He is and begin to bring clarity of the gospel and how the gospel plays an integral role in my shame. The more I begin to understand God and the more I begin to pursue Jesus, more aware of how close He already is to me, the more I am aware of myself. There was some things far out in the past I hadn't confronted. Easy to believe that all of those things are out the door and I don't have to worry about them ever again. That's how I thought. That's not the case. For me, God has shown me that in order to go forward, I must go backwards. And I have to deal and confront with my past demons in order to understand true victory in the future. And so for me, I made a top 10 list of worst things that happened in my life. I also, to the side, listed the lie that I bought into because of that memory. So for example, one of my worst memories was, I wrote it down. 1 second. No one's even here. I had been 10 or so, and I was completely in terror of darkness. There was something to me in my brain or in my mind equated, because I'm in the dark, I'm alone. And I remember specifically my mom did not want me to sleep in her room. She was teaching me how to sleep in my own room. And I remember she would lock her door. And that was the most scariest thing of my life because I was now alone. I remember, man, I know exactly where we were at. Memories like this, and these are the type of memories I'm talking about. You remember what shirt you were wearing. You remember what kind of socks you were wearing. I was in my room and I was good. And I had all my little stuffed animals around me and I was straight. I couldn't do it. I got scared. So I remember opening up my door and the hallway, it just seemed so freaking long. And I remember just Usain Bolt into my mom's room and I grabbed the doorknob. I swear it was like a scary movie when you realize the door is locked and you look behind you and there's the enemy, there's the monster, and he got you. So that's exactly what was going through my head. It was horrible. And my mom never opened the door. And so in my mind with that memory, I negated that memory with a lie that said, I am alone and I am neglected. And so I did that for my top 10 list. It was exhausting. The idea behind this exercise is to engage in all of your senses and allow yourself to go back to that place. And so once I got to that place of going back in my past, that fear again began to rise up in me. I just began to pray because I knew the Lord was leading me to this. I knew that He had a purpose. I just didn't know what it was for. And so I'm just in my room and I'm in my mind thinking, engaging in my senses, thinking about this moment in my life. And I just began to ask God, where were you in this moment? What were you doing in this moment? What were you thinking in this moment? As I was screaming and crying for my mom, what did you feel? Where were you? As I began to pray that, I begin to invite him into that space. I begin to invite him in my memories. I begin to invite him in my past. I begin to invite him into my brokenness, a place where I have yet surrendered to the Lord. I have yet to surrender that fear, that fear where it was rooted deep in that moment of my past. I begin to invite God in there. And so I encourage you to do this as well, this exercise. I encourage you to write down a list of your top 10 worst memories, and beside those memories, the lies that you begin to think. What I began to realize was God was showing me his sovereignty, and he was showing me how he will never leave us, which also means he will forever be with us. I began to see the Lord bring restoration into my memory. And I remember hearing and seeing, like, in my mind's eye, and I'm like, Jesus comforting me, like Jesus having compassion on this little boy who was scared out of his mind, and Jesus being the light in the darkness, and Jesus bringing enlightenment and love to my fear, and Jesus just being like a perfect dad, God being a perfect dad in that moment, and just embracing me as a son. In my darkness and in my fear, I began to see the light and love of God, and I just began to weep. Like, it was a very intimate time. And when you open up and you're honest with yourself, I was vulnerable, and in that place God met me. And it's so intimate. It's so intimate to be with God in those moments. God has shown me that the gospel and the presence of Jesus in my memories breaks shame. And so unconfessed sin in my past, or shame, or things that I now am not comfortable with sharing, I can share because I've already given that to God, and I have already given up my shame to God. And now I am fully known. I am fully seen. It's almost like Adam being naked in the garden with God, and he's innocent. He's just chilling. And he is fully content because he's known, he's seen, he's loved, and he's free. Most of all, Adam is free. And that's what I love about the gospel, and that's what I love about what God began to show me was in my shame, he desires to bring freedom. And so now I understand in that verse about freedom, whomever the Son sets free is free indeed. That verse is now alive. It makes sense. Like, I'm living that verse. It's for freedom's sake, so that we may love and serve other people. You know, looking back at all the things that I wrote down, it did not make sense as to how I was still alive, because I did some crazy things back in my past. Like, I did some wild things, and it makes you curious as to why am I still alive. And for me, I begin to see the sovereignty of God. I begin to see that, God wants me here for a reason. Like he has a purpose and attention. And I begin to see God as author, right? So he's continuing to write my story. He's continuing to write your story. He's continuing to write our story. And every single word, every single letter, every single period is with purpose and with intention. And not only did I become free from my past, but I begin to see clarity for my future. I begin to see purpose for my future. And overall, I became grateful, because every mistake, every suffering, every hardship, everything is with purpose, and it's ultimately in God's hands. And it's ultimately Him writing the story. And so when you look at life like that, there's really no way to be down or depressed or be boggled down by your past, because God is showing me how to let go and how to invite him into my brokenness. And the outcome and the fruit of that is freedom and gratefulness. And it's wild, man. Like this is how good God is. You know what I mean? Like this is the gospel. Like, dang. And so if you don't know God, then continue watching these videos and like let them be proof. But if you do know God and you desire emotional healing, that is the place where I would start. Write down your top 10 worst memories. Be honest with yourself and be strong and allow God to do what God does best. And that's heal, love, set free,